Ready when you are, Carson.
Thank you, Carson.
Great. And it looks like we are now streaming live. So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jonathan Weber, and I am the Deputy Director of Florida Conservation Voters. And tonight is another part of our series of conversations with FCV endorsed candidates. It is my pleasure to chat tonight with Clint Barras, who is a Democrat running for election in House District 120. HD 120 is an open seat as the incumbent Representative Holly Rothschein cannot run again due to term limits. Clint, I'm so delighted to have you here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It is an honor, and also to earn the endorsement from Florida conservation voters. I'm looking forward to working with you shoulder to shoulder when I get to Tallahassee.
Definitely. And you know, we all love Florida, and every region of Florida has its own qualities. But Clint, let's be real here. You live in Key West, which is truly one of the more special places in the entire country. Of course, your district is much more than just Key West. But so can you tell us and the viewers a little bit about HD 120 and what makes it so unique?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So it's one of the largest districts I found in the state. So it goes all the way from the south, the southernmost city, Key West. As you said, I've lived here with my wife for 22 years. All of the Florida Keys north into South Miami-Dade, Florida City, Homestead, north, all the way north to Princeton, and then west past the Redlands and almost to Naples. A large swath of the Everglades is included in that. And interestingly, we have two areas of critical state concern. In Florida, there's 4 total, but 2 of which are right here in District 120. One is Big Cypress in the Everglades, and then the other is the entirety of the Florida Keys. And then so being in an area of critical state concern, this really kind of means that they regulate our development to make sure that we can preserve some of the lands here. And then of course, there's a lot of diversity in our district. In the Monroe County portion, the Florida Keys portion, obviously it's it's a heavy tourism and fishing economy. We have the Bay Area Reef that goes all the way from the Tortugas and then stretches around and follows Florida up to almost like the Fort Lauderdale area, actually. And then, of course, the Miami-Dade portion of my district is heavy agriculture, a lot of farmlands in that area as well. So a lot of diversity in District 120 for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, when a lot of people from around the country, like when they think about Florida, I think they see, you know, like Key West in their mind, right? Or their Keys, right? Or Southern Florida with like the palm. It's just such an iconic image in our minds when we think of Florida. So I love HD 120. But there are issues there, like everywhere, and issues with development and growth have been ongoing for decades. But in the Keys and Southern Miami-Dade, it is a little bit more dramatic. Considering the Keys are islands and not getting any bigger. And of course, the fragile Everglades take up a lot of space in Miami-Dade. So can you just tell us a little bit about development in your district and what you would like to see change?
Sure. So again, there's really the dichotomy of the district. In the Florida Keys area, where we are under that area of critical state concern, there hasn't been a lot of new development. And as you say, we're islands. There isn't the urban sprawl that you get in other areas. But what we have seen over the last couple of decades is a lot of resort development. And what they'll do is we have a limit on how many building permits are available. And so what these resorts will do is they'll take ROGO units, or basically the rate of growth ordinance, basically a building permit. They'll take them from existing like trailer parks and other low income housing options. And then they use those to subsidize their building of these resorts, which just puts further pressure on our existing affordable housing crisis that we have down here. And it really is a crisis. As I mentioned, my wife and I moved here over 22 years ago, and they were talking about affordable housing then. It's always a topic of conversation. But at the same time, our local governments keep approving these different resorts and not addressing, the issues at hand. So it's kind of upsetting in that regard. There's a lot of people in our community that are struggling, from day to day. Now, in the Miami-Dade portion, the heavy agriculture, they are seeing a lot of development growth, specifically developers trying to take smaller farmlands and developing those. And of course, when you take away farms and you put development there, that means that there's going to be more water degradation and more pollution. So what I'd like to see changed, and this is one of the reasons why I'm actually running for office, is Florida has a very porous foundation. It's called karst topography, but we have a limestone foundation. And science has shown, for instance, that if you put dye into a septic tank, it's just a matter of days before that dye leaches out into the surrounding waters around the septic tank. And so what we've seen over the last several decades is a lot of growth through Central Florida and around Florida. And a lot of these developments have been built on septic. And so I watched this lecture once from a Dr. Brian LaPointe here at our local college. And he was saying that the water, by the time it enters Lake Okeechobee, already has 90% of the nitrogen and the phosphorus. So down here, Big Sugar always gets the finger pointed at him for polluting the water that's been killing Florida Bay and our reef literally for decades. And so they're not, solely to blame here. And so the things I would like to see is just more responsible development. Obviously, we can't not develop. Florida is a growing state. We've already got 22 million people and counting, but we need to really kind of look at responsible development. New communities should be put on sewer. When we moved here over 20 years ago, the Florida Keys had just embarked on converting us from septic over to sewer. It was like $1 billion project. We had to eat a quarter of the cost of that. But now our nearshore waters are beautiful. When we first moved down here, we were having alerts put at the beach, fecal alerts and things like that. So we don't have those hardly anymore at all. So I think that, we need to kind of look more holistically at the state, what we're doing. And I think also too, local planning boards need to have a longer view on the development, and you've heard of the 7th generation thinking, the Iroquois Indians, where you make a decision today and what are those environmental ramifications 7 generations later. And I really think that, our leaders don't have that long perspective. And I think that would certainly help.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. And I love kind of your nuanced take there on development, because I think that, every district kind of has a similar story, or almost every district, right? Is that in Florida, our story is development and growth. And I think that everyone who's lived here for any period of time probably has some area in their local town that they think themselves was like, boy, that seemed like hastily put together, or that really probably shouldn't go there because that was a wetland and that's going to cause problems. That area is going to flood no matter what they do. And just to hear you talk about it that way, I think is just spot on. And I agree that, when it comes to water pollution, I mean, it's a huge problem, and there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. So again, just hearing you, talk about the nuance in those areas, really, I think it's awesome. So thank you so much for that. But you hit on a great point, right? In that in Florida, our environment is our economy. And nowhere is that really more important than in HD 120. Just off your shores, you did mention the world famous Florida Reef, which is the 3rd largest coral barrier reef system in the entire world. I grew up in Broward, which isn't too far away. And I remember very clearly my mom and my grandfather taking me down to John Penny Camp for the first time to go snorkeling. I get seasick like really easy. So I get seasick every single time. But the moment you put on those goggles and you view a living coral reef, I mean, there's nothing like it in the world, right? Like it's a transformative experience. Unfortunately, our reef is under a significant amount of stress from climate change to water pollution. In recent years, though, the city of Key West banned the use of certain kinds of sunscreens that have chemicals in them that harm corals. Earlier this year, the Florida legislature passed a law essentially invalidating Key West law and says that no local government in Florida can regulate the sale of potentially harmful sunscreens. So my question is for you is, how do you feel about the city's original ban and then now the legislature's ban of the ban?
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. And first, let me just say, I heard you say that in Florida, our environment is our economy. And I use those same words. And I couldn't agree with that sentiment more, not just for the entire state. People from all over the world come here to enjoy the diverse natural wonders that we have, but especially down here in District 120. And it's also important to keep into context of the importance of our coral reefs. So the coral reefs in the world's total marine environment account for less than 1/4%. Yet some estimates have coral reefs responsible for up to 2 million different species, and 25% of all marine life and nurseries start in coral reefs. So it is hugely important. our coral reef in the 1970s had about 50% coral cover. And today we're down to about 2% coral cover, which is really concerning. And there's a lot of other stressors. One of the things, ocean acidification, which is when we get a lot of carbon in the air and then the carbon settles and it hits the ocean. That makes the ocean water more acidic, and then that harms the corals. Coral bleaching through climate change and the warming of our seawaters. The warm water will kill off coral too. In fact, we're having a coral bleaching warning right now because the waters are so warm out there. And then for the last couple of years, you probably heard that we have the white stony coral tissue loss disease, which is this disease that has been infecting corals. It started up in the Miami area, and then it started going north to the reef track north and south. And for a while there, we thought it wasn't going to spread past the 7 Mile Bridge, past Marathon, but it eventually made the leap. And so now even as far as Key West, and then now moving even further west towards the Tortugas. And there are few corals that are spared by this disease. And so already facing so many stressors, to have, yet another, to slap. But the sunscreen ban specifically, it was very upsetting. There's 2 chemicals specifically that were in there that we wanted to ban that are known to kill coral reefs, oxybenzone and oxynate. Sorry if I'm not saying that right. So there's a lot, yeah, I'm sure there's somebody out there that can pronounce that for me. There's a lot of other sunscreens that do not have these chemicals that are, natural alternatives. And for the last 12 years, I've served on the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council. Most recently as chair. I just recently termed out. But I was very happy to address the Key West City Commission in favor of the ban. And it's incredibly frustrating to see our Republican legislators in Tallahassee overturn our ordinance that really protects our livelihoods and our environment down here. And the reason why, let's face it, is because they're backed by these big corporate donors, the Johnson & Johnsons and the makers of these various sunscreens that don't want a ban. And it's just really frustrating that, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, Republicans are all about states' rights. And if you get to the federal level and, we should be able to make our own decisions. However, here locally, it seems like they preempt local decisions all the time. And I really do believe that there are so many different situations that should be decided at a local level, that the local community is much more able to weigh in on those matters than somebody from Tallahassee.
Right. Yeah. And, it's has been shocking to me just in my time as someone who, works at the legislature and I monitor everything that's going on. There has been this strong kind of push on preemption, is what we call it, when they, the state government will overrule local government. And there's been, in all areas, we're kind of seeing this happen all over. So I love the fact that you are kind of on top of this issue already, and you kind of have the eye out for it, because I think you're right. Our system is set up that we govern at the lowest level possible. That's the whole kind of idea behind our country. And to see pick and choose issues here and there to kind of preempt seems just not right. So again, I love that, and I also love that you spoke about ocean acidification. Anytime a candidate talks about ocean acidification, it makes me excited. So that's fantastic, because it plays right into my next question, which is, climate change is the greatest threat facing Florida and House District 120, being the Florida Keys and Southern Miami-Dade and the Everglades. It seems to be one of the most at-risk places on the planet. Many states have set goals for transitioning to clean energy to reduce our reliance on dirty fossil fuels, yet Florida still lags remarkably far behind. So what are your goals as they relate to climate change, clean energy, and protecting our environment?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And again, it's really sad that our state hasn't taken a more leadership role in this, but District 120 is the canary in the coal mine, if you will. In fact, Miami is the most vulnerable city in the world in terms of economic loss to sea level rise. And then, of course, we have our nuclear power plant, Turkey Point, situated right between Miami and the Florida Keys, which, they have this high salinated, their cooling canals have been leaking for years. And this highly saline water has been encroaching closer and closer to our aquifers, which all of the Florida Keys get our drinking water from this aquifer, and they haven't been, Florida Power and Light has not been taking the steps necessary to correct this issue. And then they recently applied back to the Florida EPA to continue their pollution permit and to keep Turkey Point operational for several more decades, which would make it the oldest nuclear plant in America, and in 2060 would be underwater. So it just really doesn't make a lot of sense. We're already seeing the effects of sea level rise in our District 120. Some places in Key Largo, it's a place called Silwright Point. They get up to 16 inches of water and standing water for over 85 days. This is a really big issue down here. FEMA recently released some new flood maps for Monroe County and South Miami-Dade, and there are significantly more properties now that are in a flood zone that weren't. This obviously has serious ramifications for our property values down here and resale values. I've been speaking with the Monroe County sustainability manager, and she had given a presentation recently, or about a year ago, to the South Florida Climate Summit that they have here. It was actually in South Florida in 2019. They held it here in Key West, actually. But Monroe County is the third county in the nation for being the highest population displaced by sea level rise by 2060. So they're projecting 36% of our population in the Monroe County area will have to relocate, and in Miami-Dade, that's 3%. So this is a serious issue, and as you know, our state has had its head in the sand, totally ignoring the science behind this, just like they're doing right now with this pandemic. And there's other issues too that go along with this, because as the water table begins to rise, old sewer connections, not so much here. Again, I mentioned how we just recently, 20 years ago, we re-sewered and connected everything here, but specifically up in the Miami-Dade area, once the water starts going over those sewer lines, they will break, and then all of a sudden you're going to get all of this wastewater into the surrounding area as well. So it is not an inexpensive solution. The sustainability person at Monroe County, she was showing me some of her PowerPoint that she had done, and for just 3 miles of road that they were showing as an example, well, they'll have to raise the road, do the wastewater and the stormwater mitigation and all of that, was going to cost $181 million. And then so here in Monroe County alone, we have 314 miles of managed highway that we would be responsible for. So we're talking tens of billions with a B of dollars to fix this. So my goals, first, under Rick Scott, our previous governor, he struck the word climate change from the nomenclature in Tallahassee, which is just baffling. And wow. Then, Ron DeSantis, even though early on, I think a lot of Democrats had some hope that he was going to be an environmentalist, I think that's kind of the shine is tarnished off of that as well. So I think that we need to do a much better job actually facing science and acting accordingly. We know what needs to be done, and it's not going to help. Another day of delay is not going to help. I remember that I was at a group, a training, and we were talking about climate change, and one person in the group had talked about that it is such a big issue that it's too big for a city to tackle. Like they're waiting for the nation or the UN or some other bigger, broad, decision maker. And I couldn't disagree with that more. Yeah, and I think I might have told you this before, Jonathan, but I took a lot of philosophy classes in college. And there was one that kind of sticks out, Immanuel Kant. And I give this example where it's kind of like universal thinking and what would happen if you universalize your thoughts and your actions. So I give the example, if I had a piece of paper in my hand, you may not think it's a big deal to litter, to throw it on the ground. It's one piece of paper, no big deal. But if you universalize that and think, okay, what happens if 7 billion people, everybody on the planet throws down a piece of paper, now it's a much bigger deal. And so really we should all be living our lives with the idea that what would happen if everybody did this thing that I'm doing now? And it could be everything from, telling a lie or being honest or treating people nicely or not nicely, things like that. And so I think that every person makes a difference. So everything that we do, from recycling and putting solar on our houses or getting a hybrid vehicle, like every little bit has a cumulative effect. And so it's not a problem that is beyond our grasp. We know the things that we need to do, and it takes every person, every city, every state, everybody to get on board and take the steps that we need to take now to stop this existential threat that is really, it is our biggest threat facing our district.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and it was really well put, because like I said, I work at the Capitol, and I go over there, and just the lack of movement on all sorts of really good ideas. I mean, there's no shortage of good climate bills and good clean energy pro solar bills that are sponsored every year, but they don't even get a single hearing sometimes, Clint, and that just is like infuriating to me, because we're not even having the discussion. Which, I mean, it's 2020. We know that we only have a few years left to really make a difference. Florida being the third largest state in the country, I mean, we are poised to really make a play here, and it's crickets at the Capitol, and it's just infuriating. So thank you so much for your leadership on that. I mean, we need it desperately. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Of course, we are an environmental organization, and climate change is at the top of our to-do list, but it doesn't mean it's the only thing we do. We do have voters in our name, as well as conservation. And so we believe strongly that when more eligible citizens vote, our environment wins. Unfortunately, voting is not as easy as it should be in Florida. In 2018, voters passed a monumental constitutional amendment, Amendment 4, that regranted the right to vote to formerly incarcerated returning citizens. Despite a clear mandate from the people of Florida, the legislature and the governor have prevented that amendment from being implemented as originally intended. FCV, just so you know, we were a strong proponent of Amendment 4. How does the situation around Amendment 4, how does it make you feel? And what will you do when you are in office to ensure that every eligible voter has a chance to exercise their right?
Yeah, it's very upsetting to say, as you mentioned, the Florida voters passed it with over or close to 65%. So the will of the voters was very clear. And I think the issue there is that Republicans know that when more people vote, the Democrats win. And so I'm just going to go ahead and call it like I see it. So Republicans are known for putting up barriers to voting and disenfranchising people to vote. And so basically, as you know, that they enacted after the amendment passed, overwhelmingly, they passed this new law that says that they also had to pay all these past due fines, which is effectively a poll tax. And even though it's it's going through legal challenges, it's not going to be settled before this November election. And it's really this, it's discouraging. And what I will do is I will fight in any way that I possibly can to make sure that every eligible voter has the ability to vote. And if that means, expanding our vote by mail program, automatically registering people when they turn 18, all sorts of different creative ways that we can make sure that we have higher civic participation in our government, which is so critical. And it just seems like there's so much apathy around us about politics and how much one person can actually do. I just it may be a little bit more concentration in civics education in school too, to really let people understand the importance of their vote.
Yeah, I attribute a lot of I remember 7th grade civics. I took it. That was one of the classes that really turned me on to government and learning about how things work. And I remember I pre-registered in high school to register to vote. And a lot of my classmates did not. I remember that. And it's not that they didn't do it for any reason besides they just didn't do it. So again, I'm a huge fan of automatic voter registration. I love that you mentioned that. And I mean, it's 2020. There are we're a very smart, technical, savvy society. There's got to be a way to figure it out that when someone goes to update their license, or they go to pay some kind of bill or do something with the state, that the computer automatically updates your voter registration and makes sure that you're registered to vote. Why wouldn't we do that? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I would love to see that move forward. But until that point, fighting for every single voter that we can, I think, is just so important. So I'm just delighted to hear you talk so passionately about that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Clint, we are just about out of time, but before we go, I'm going to leave the floor. You can speak about anything you want or tell us anything, but I definitely, before we go, would love it if you could tell the viewers a little bit about the state of your race and how they can learn more or get involved with your campaign.
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate that. Running for office was not something that was long on my radar. I'd actually read an article, and there wasn't a solid Democrat running. And so I went all around the community, all around the district, trying to find somebody. And I'm the guy, right? In the words of John Lewis, if not you, who? And if not now, when? So I stand up for principles I believe in, and that's what I'm doing right now. And I know it wasn't going to be an easy road. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot more work, honestly, than I even thought it was going to be early on. A labor of love. Again, I am not doing this for myself. I want to work to enact a better future for my girls, for my daughters, and for all Floridians. I think for too long, the suffering of just everyday Floridians have been ignored. Everything from our cost of living and our minimum wage. I mean, there's just so much disparity in our state, from healthcare, you name it. And I'm running to put people first, and everything that our state does. I think that if we put our people and our communities and our environment first, then our state will win no matter what. Let's make the state a desirable place where businesses want to relocate to, and we'll raise everybody up from the ground up. I'm just, I'm excited to be running. I was unopposed in the primary. There were 3 Republicans. It was a very dirty, muddy primary. Luckily, I was able to focus on raising funds. Again, I got in very late. I got in February, just before the pandemic. And so it's been a very surreal campaign for me. Sure. I just keep having to tell myself that all candidates are in the same boat that I am, and, just keep paddling as hard as I can, and, that we'll get there. So I'm not going to sell out my integrity or my values. I'm there to effectuate a positive change for everybody. And if that means I'm a one-term rep, then that's what it means. But I'll hold my head high and be able to look at my daughters in the eye, for the rest of my life. So I would appreciate it if any of your viewers are in House District 120. They can go to my website, which is clintforflorida.com. On the homepage down there, they can sign up to receive information. I send out a weekly, every 6 days or so, I'll send out an email. It talks about the different issues. And there are so many issues right now. In just a couple of days, our state moratorium on evictions is expiring. And shortly, we'll have a homeless crisis on our hands during a pandemic. And it's just, again, we need to put people first. Our governor has yet to accept the $300 a week from federal money to give to our unemployed. Initially there was a $100 string attached that our state would have to put $100 in, and the federal would put $300. That has since gone away. And now it's just a matter of our governor to accept this money. We have millions of Floridians right now that are starving and can't pay for their food and their rent and their bills. And it just seems heartless to me that our government, our Republican-led government, is just callous to the concerns of the people. And so, I'm hoping to change all of that, and at least be a conduit of change. So
well, I love it. And, and it's one of those things that we just need as many people as possible trying to fight for what's right in the state. And I do believe that, we'll prevail. It's going to happen. And I'm so glad to, allow our viewers get a chance to know you a little bit more. Clint, I think you're running a great campaign, and obviously, I think I love all the issues you talk about. Clearly, there are more issues in the state of Florida than just the ones we spoke about tonight, but we could be here for the next probably 2 days straight, a marathon thing we could do, but we're not going to do that. But thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll talk again soon. Maybe after the election, we can do another one of these. We can update our viewers on what's going on with you after the election. Then how about that?
I would love it. Yeah, you can tell me which environmental bills I'm pushing through the legislature.
Yeah, we'll see. Thank you so much, Clint. Have a wonderful day. And thank you everyone for watching. I appreciate it.
Thank you.